In the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, we saw Kaiba rip up the 4th copy of Blue Eyes White Dragon so that he may be the only player to harness the strongest monster's power. That was a cool moment in the show, but not very realistic when we consider that in real life, cards are printed in mass quantities and shipped out across the world in booster packs. However, there are select few cards that rival the rarity of the powerful creature of destruction itself in real life.
Yes.
Where other card game players earn cash prizes for performing well at events, Yu-Gi-Oh players found themselves winning prize cards when they win tournaments, and these cards are by no means easy to get your hands on. From Cyberstein back in 2004 all the way to this very day, prize cards have had varying degrees of playability, but what happens when a card this difficult to acquire becomes mandatory to win tournaments? Well, we find ourselves in a scenario similar to when Kaiba ribbed the extra copy of Blue Eyes, don't we? This is the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Prize cards and the times they were so strong that owning one meant the difference between being a champion and fighting for second place at best. Back in 2004, Upper Deck, the company in charge of running Yu-Gi-Oh! As a whole, teamed up with Shonen Jump to create Yu-Gi-Oh!'s most prestigious tournament series to date, the Shonen Jump Championship, or SJCs for short. The first announcement of the SJC website described it as a tournament where you can duel for unprecedented prestige and prizes. Among those prizes were PlayStation 2 systems, a laptop, and many more, but nothing compared to the #1 prize of the event, the very first SJC prize card, Cyberstein. Not only was Cyberstein the first ever Yu-Gi-Oh! Prize card, this was also the first time players could get their hands on a physical copy of this card. Prize card Cyberstein began distribution in December of 2004, being given exclusively to the player who got first place at an SJC during its stint, and alternatively, one copy of the prize card could be earned by playing in side events. This meant that at every SJC event, 2 copies of the current prize card would be given out, resulting in a very low number of them being distributed at all. It was meant to be a prize card after all. Over the course of its stint as a prize card, 18 copies of Cyberstein were distributed, 9 to SJC winners and 9 to side event winners, making the card extremely exclusive. But what did those who had the card do with them? Well, they probably sold them or stored them because during its time as a prize card, Cyberstein saw no competitive success at all. It appeared in no topping deck lists for regional or higher level events, most likely due to the fact that Magical Scientist, a card with an arguably more powerful yet quite similar effect as that of Stein, was available out of Magician's Force as a rare for a good period of time during SJC Stein's lifespan. Cyberstein eventually got reprinted as a rare in Dark Beginnings 2 in July of 2005.
Dark Soul and Cyberstein is coming back.
Making it way more accessible to the player base. Paired with powerful fusion monsters out of Cybernetic Revolution, such as Cyber Twin Dragon, Stein found success in tournament in no time, topping a Minnesota regional in October of that same year, followed by a top at SJC San Francisco not long after that. While Cyberstein is remembered to this day as a powerful card that's been banned twice over the last 2 decades in the TCG, it surprisingly was initially a very underwhelming card that didn't do much during its time as a prize card. Not exactly a card worth ripping in half to avoid other players being able to use it against you. Following Cyberstein's distribution period, Upper Deck announced their second ever SJC prize card. This time, it was Des Volscal. Appearing for the first time in episode 112 of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, Volscal was a card that combined a very mediocre effect to a monster that was weaker than Summoned Skull, resulting in an overall disappointing prize card that was nowhere nearly as powerful or popular as Cyberstein was. It was distributed between August of 2005 and April of 2006, with a total of 20 copies being won during this time, 10 by SJC winners and 10 as side event prizing. Similarly to Cyberstein though, this card did not appear in any topping decklist during its time as a prize card, but for different reasons.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
Volscal was simply weaker than any other cards already available in the game, even after its reprint in Gold Series 2 in 2009. But the next prize card wasn't nearly as forgetful as this one was. The third SJC prize card was none other than Shrink, a card used numerous times by Kaiba in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime. This prize card was distributed a total of 26 times, 13 to SGC winners and 13 to side event winners, from May to December of 2006, and for the first time, a prize card found its way into the top cut of a major Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament.
Shonen Jump Shrink. Here, I played one shrink. You can't even click on the shrink here, so we have to go over here. Yeah, I played one shrink in the main. It wasn't even out yet. It was only a prize card.
At SJC Houston 2007, Adam Korn piloted a Monarch deck with a single copy of Shrink prize card in his main deck to a top 8 finish in that tournament. Before this event, no prize card had ever been in the top cut of a major tournament prior to getting a reprint. But Shrink was the first thanks to its ability to deal with high attack point monsters, something Korn's Monarch deck could use to his advantage in many ways. This top was very short-lived for Shrink, however, as it was reprinted literally 2 weeks later in Strike of Neos.
Whatever you get, now you can add unstoppable strength to your collection with the Strike of Neos.
Shrink did, however, follow in the footsteps of Cyberstein, finding a decent amount of success post-reprint in the late GX era, being a good battle trick in decks that cared a lot about the battle phase, such as gadgets and eventually gladiator beasts down the line. While Shrink was the first SJC prize card to see a small amount of competitive success during its time as a prize card, nothing could really prepare the player base for the absolute plague that would be the next Shonen Jump prize card. Beginning distribution in January 2007, no one expected Crush Card Virus to be as powerful of a card as it was. Fans of the anime would recognize this prize card as one of the most powerful trap cards in Kaiba's deck, but its power really got to show once it was finally released in the TCG as the 4th SJC prize card. Contrary to other prize cards, Crush Card Virus actually had an insanely powerful effect that is effectively a mix of Delinquent Duo and Pegasus's Millennium Eye. The card read, tribute one dark monster with 1000 or less attack, check all monsters on your opponent's side of the field, your opponent's hand, and all cards they draw until the end of your opponent's third turn after this card's activation, and destroy all monsters with 1500 or more attack. Where Shrink applied a decent effect once, Crush Card Virus gave you full knowledge of your opponent's hand immediately, as well as everything they drew for the next 3 turns, on top of getting rid of most of their important cards. Destroying a Dark Arm Dragon and Stratos versus Dad decks, or Laquarian Bestiari versus Gladiator Beast decks, effectively crippled those decks to the point where Crush Card's resolution spelled the end of the game almost immediately. This prize card saw its first major event top at SJC Philadelphia in 2007, but this was nowhere near the last time it would make top cut of a big event. Crush Card's popularity exploded in February of 2008, specifically due to the rise of Dad Return, a deck that utilized Dark Arm Dragon and Return from the Different Dimension to swarm the field and establish board presence, which also used Crush Card Virus as an effectively required piece of the deck's control element, making for one of the most powerful decks in all of Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Crush Card Virus is generally considered the best and most impactful prize card in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! At its prime, any player in the room that had the card was significantly more likely to win whatever event they were playing in than anyone who didn't own one. So much so that when entering a tournament during this time, you were playing for second place, as not owning a Crush Card Virus typically meant that winning the tournament was most likely off the table for you. Over the course of its time as an SJC prize card, only 20 of these were distributed, 10 to SJC winners and 10 to side event winners, which paired with the sheer power of the card made it the single most expensive card in the game by a lot at its peak. There are rumors that a small handful of copies of Crush Card Virus mistakenly found their way into Power of the Duelist sneak peek event packs, and while not confirmable by any means, this is widely considered true by a majority of the player base.
Crush Card Virus's peak value, while it was a prize card only, was around $3,500, and you gotta actually adjust for inflation because that's during the 2008 recession.
Crush Card Virus's run wouldn't end at just the time it was a prize card, however. Despite being insanely powerful during its time as exclusively a prize card, Crush Card Virus was more popular than ever after its reprint in Gold Series 1 in April of 2008, but unfortunately, its reprint only made it slightly easier to get your hands on. You see, Konami's well known for short printing cards in sets. Some even reported Crush Card being so rare that you'd only pull a single copy in every 5 cases of booster boxes that you would open.
I got it!
As a result, due to how incredibly difficult it was to get the card, Crush Card would continue to fetch an incredibly high price alongside Allure of Darkness and Darkarm Dragon himself.
Crush Card Virus is the most expensive reprint of a card of all time, mainly due to it being short printed where you open an entire case of Gold Series not to even see one on average. So with that, people were paying $350 for the reprinted version of Crush during the Teledad era.
Despite Crush Card Virus fitting right in with Darkarm Dragon decks, those were actually not the only decks people would play this card in. Due to how strong the card was against Darkarm Dragon decks, other decks such as Gladiator Beast played the card too in tandem with low attack dark monsters such as DD Crow and Sangan just to be able to resolve Crush Card. I'm not exaggerating when I say that resolving Crush Card Virus almost always meant that you were winning the game. So much so that Sandwich's price spiked at the time due to the ability Elemental Hero Prisma had to reveal Sandwich and dump Sangan to the grave, just so some decks could get additional access to a small dark monster should they have drawn their copy of Crush Card Virus. With how dominant this card was both during its time as a prize card and post-reprint, it comes as no surprise that the card would ultimately be banned from competitive play in September of 2009. Where it would remain until 2015, when it was removed from the ban list.
For the spells, Crush Card, again, errata card. We knew that one was coming.
But not without having its text changed to be significantly less powerful, and to this day, the card no longer sees any form of competitive play. Despite how much of an impact Crush Card had, it was however not the only prize card utilized in Darkarm Dragon decks to make them so powerful. Being first introduced in episode 224 of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime back in 2006, the fifth Shonen Jump prize card would be Goldsarcophagus, although with a significantly different effect than it had in the anime.
And here's how it works!
For its TCG release, Goldsarcophagus could banish any card from your deck, and then 2 turns later would add that card back to your hand, effectively granting the player who used it the ability to search for any card in their deck and add it to their hand a few turns later. Considering how slow Yu-Gi-Oh! Was at the time,
I'm hoping that that doesn't mean that we are going to get gravity binded out of this game. Well,
it comes as no surprise that the card saw play almost immediately after distribution began, finding its first top at SJC Washington, DC in Chris Perovic's Top 8 Diamond Dude Turbo deck in September of 2007. Goldsarc fit right at home in Darkarm Dragon decks, not only due to its ability to add any card from your deck to your hand, but also for its ability to banish cards from your deck, a gameplay mechanic that decks could utilize to their advantage. Distribution of this card, however, was a little different than it was for previous prize cards. Starting with Goldsarcophagus, Upper Deck announced that they would now be awarding a prize card to the top 3 duelist of SJC tournaments, not only the winner. Ultimately, 21 copies were given to players that found themselves at the top 3 of SJCs, and 7 were given out as side event prizes over the course of Goldsarc's period as a prize card, for a total of 28 copies being given out. The card ended up being limited very quickly before ultimately being reprinted in Gold Series 2,
Goldsarco.
where it became playable for a majority of players. Goldsarcophagus marked the beginning of prize cards being distributed to the top 3 players of an SJC rather than exclusively the winner. This next card took it to a whole new level with the amount of copies of it that were given out.
Welcome to Tech Tuesdays, a weekly series where we discuss some awesome tech cards as well as help make you a better player. This week's card is Doom Caliber Knight. This awesome card's gonna
Doom Caliber Knight was the 6th SJC prize card to get announced, and a whopping 68 copies of it were distributed during its stint as a prize card, from March 2008 to January 2009. While Doom Caliber Knight didn't see as much play as Goldsarcophagus did during its time as an SJC prize card, it still had a wide variety of uses and an overall pretty high ceiling as an individual card. Its big 1900 attack body could beat over most normal summons in the game at that time, and paired with its ability to negate and destroy any monster that tried to activate its effect, made for Doomcal being a force to be reckoned with. The card was strong when attacking into a flip effect monster that had a powerful effect such as Raiko the Lightsworn Hunter, but where Doomcal shined most was in its ability to beat over a monster the opponent had on field, and then simply sit there ready to negate and destroy whatever follow-up the opponent would try to play. Gadget players couldn't play a gadget into it, Rescue Cat would be stopped by it as well, heck, even battle-heavy decks like Gladiator Beast didn't have a good way to deal with it.
Doom Caliber Knight was a crazy card because you had to have a non-monster answer for this, or you're giving your opponent's turn 2 as a turn 1 where they can attack, especially in a metagame where Cold Wave as well as Giant Trunade exist. You're looking at Rescue Cat wanting to pop off, staring down Doom Cal, and you better have a way to get it off the board, or you're not going to be progressing your game like you want to combo off with.
Doom Caliber Knight was the prize card to find the quickest success after being released as a prize card, finding its first top only a month after its initial distribution started, placing second in Mario Matthew's Dad Return deck at SJC Minneapolis in 2008. As it was seen on numerous occasions in the top tables of tournaments before being reprinted in Turbo Pack 1 later in 2009. Doom Caliber Knight's reprint also seemed to come very quickly in comparison to that of other prize cards, but this was largely due to one of the most notorious events to have occurred in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, which would change the Shonen Jump Championship circuit indefinitely moving forward. In early 2009, Konami filed a lawsuit against Upper Deck Entertainment, the company in charge of running and distributing Yu-Gi-Oh at the time, for distributing Yu-Gi-Oh trading card packs containing counterfeit rare cards. This dispute went back and forth, with Upper Deck alleging that Konami stopped sending them certain packs, as well as both companies arguing over who owned the trademark for the well-known Eye of Anubis that appears on the bottom right corner of every Yu-Gi-Oh card. Overall, this was a mess of a situation, which ultimately resulted in the partnership between Konami and Upper Deck being terminated and possession of the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, as well as its distribution fully returning to the hands of Konami. All while this was ongoing, there was a new SJC prize card that would be announced. Dark End Dragon, the final Shonen Jump prize card to have ever been created. Starting distribution in April of 2009, this would be the prize card that would be given out for an entire year straight until the indefinite pause of the SJC circuit in April of 2010, with SJC Edison being the final Shonen Jump Championship to ever take place. Dark End Dragon was by no means a bad card, with around 32 copies of it being given out during its stint as a prize card. It found its first top at SJC Orlando in September of 2009, and its popularity in dark decks continued to rise, demonstrated perfectly by how many Edison deck lists play this card, primarily in decks such as Blackwing and Zombies. While this card was no Crush Card Virus or Doom Caliber Knight, it was definitely not a bad card to close out the SJC prize card series, being both a card that was playable on release and continued to be played for years after its reprint in Shonen Jump Magazine Volume 8 and Legendary Collection 2 a year later. And there you have it, those are all 7 Shonen Jump Championship prize cards and their impact on the Yu-Gi-Oh metagame. But there is one final thing about these cards that needs to be mentioned. Throughout this video, I mentioned the number of copies of each card that was given out as a tournament prize, but 2 events that occurred near the end of Upper Deck's partnership with Konami changed those numbers drastically. The first event was none other than the aforementioned SJC Edison.
Jump starts in like an hour. I'll have more coverage up later, I guess, after I record some more stuff.
Due to it being the 50th SJC, as part of the celebration of such a large event, 2 copies of each of the first 5 SJC prize cards were given out during the tournament, as well as 1 trophy copy of each of the 5 prize cards as well. In February of 2009, Upper Deck would hold an event called Upper Deck Day. Upper Deck Day was an organized event that took place at locations throughout North America instead of the delayed Crimson Crisis sneak preview event, which was originally scheduled to be held on those days. This event had absolutely insane prizes, but among those prizes was also the opportunity to win SJC copies of Goldsarcophagus, Des Volscal, Shrink, and Cyberstein. Overall, a total of 63 Goldsarcophagus, 63 Shrinks, 63 Des Volscalfs, and 126 Cybersteins were given out during the Upper Deck Day event, resulting in each of these prize cards to be significantly easier to acquire, albeit far beyond their time of playability, but incredible for collectors wanting to get their hands on these iconic cards nonetheless. While this marked the end for Shonen Jump Championships and SJC prize cards, later down the line, Konami would release YCSs, which is the tournament structure that we have to this day. If we get 5,000 likes on this video, I will make a part 2 where we go over every single YCS prize card and their playability in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Metagame. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.